Well, nothing really happened on that day. At the first meeting of the Council of Ministers, the Prime Minister asked the Cabinet Secretary, have you provided Goda, Gadi for everyone? No one expected anything to happen immediately or even dramatically. It was a low-key beginning for the government, and most ministers, most MPs were not aware of the depth of the crisis. I think Dr. Manmohan Singh, who had started work even a couple of days earlier informally, had a fair idea of the acuteness of the crisis. I was briefed by the Commerce Secretary, Montek Ahluwalia, and others in the first few days. And I think between the Finance Ministry and the Commerce Ministry, there were many, many exchanges at the official level, and we were prepared for some major developments and changes. I had a hint that the devaluation was coming. That was the first major step. It was intended to test the waters. The public reaction was quite muted, but I think at the political level, at the party level, there was quite a backlash. I don't know who said what to on the subject, but I'm sure the backlash traveled up to the Prime Minister, and he did develop second thoughts. He called me, and I said, public reaction is muted, but people remember what happened in 1966, and they expect inflation, they expect a loss of credibility, but we had no choice. So I said, go across to the Finance Minister and tell him that we should not do the second step. It is then that I knew that a second step was being contemplated. I did go across and talk to Dr. Manmohan Singh, but he said, listen, I don't think we can pull back now. Anyway, matters were being discussed. I think on the 3rd, Prime Minister told the Finance Minister, listen, hold back the second step. It was an interesting act there. I think the Finance Ministry tried to get Dr. Rangarajan on the phone. There were no mobile phones then. And I think Dr. Rangarajan made himself unavailable. So the phone call didn't go through. By the time they established contact, he said, I've already announced the second step. But I think both were bold moves, wise moves that stabilized the currency largely and paved the way for the eventual movement toward market exchange rates. Things happened very rapidly in the next 24 hours. I think by afternoon of the 3rd, I was called by the Finance Minister. Montek had been briefed earlier, apparently, to said that he was going to announce the cash compensatory support would be withdrawn for exporters. I was aghast. I said, I have no objection in principle, but how can a Commerce Minister start his innings by withdrawing a subsidy? I said, forever he will be scarred and nobody will trust him. I think Dr. Singh saw the point, and I said, listen, we can package it. Let's work quickly on a package. But he said, I have to announce it today, because otherwise they'll get a double benefit, devaluation and CCS. I said, we can announce it late tonight. He said, can it be done? I said, I think so. So Montek and I came back and we worked furiously on a package. Maybe Dr. Singh had spoken to the Prime Minister and said, we may call on you in the evening. So by the time the package was ready and we had got it typed and we took it across to the finance minister, he saw that and he said, okay, it's fine with me. So from there we went to the Prime Minister's house. The Prime Minister was having his bath, so we were waiting. He came out in his lungi and vest, sat down and said, what brings you here? So I said, we have agreed on a package of trade reforms so that the finance minister can announce the CCS being withdrawn. So I took a couple of minutes explaining the broad features. There were not too many, just a few. Then he said, okay, have you signed? I said, yes. Then he asked Dr. Singh, have you signed? He said, yes. Then he said, give me the file, and he signed it. In fact, trade policy changes were done in a matter of 20 minutes with the Prime Minister. That was the pressing need of the hour, and therefore we moved with great speed. See, on the 4th of July, there was a seminar, I think, organized by the Observer Research Foundation. That was the first public event where the finance minister and I explained to the assembled gathering and took a few questions. I spoke about trade policy changes. FM spoke about the major changes that he was contemplating. And then the newspapers carried it. So a debate had started. I think the party got very nervous. I think the generation before my generation, those who had worked with Mrs. Indira Gandhi, were the most nervous. Therefore, there was a lot of confabulations within the party. It is at that time the industrial policy resolution was brought to the cabinet. I was present. The Prime Minister was the industry minister, but he asked Dr. Manmohan Singh to explain it. He said licenses will be abolished for most industries. I mean, people were aghast. Many people could not contemplate how industrial licensing can be done away with. The younger members, I think, were more open, but the older members were not. Anyway, there was so much opposition that Mr. Narasimha Rao wisely decided, all right, we take it back, we'll work on it, we'll come back. The meeting ended, so he called Dr. Singh and me to his chamber. I think Mr. A.N. Verma was there. He said, what do we do now? I said, well, Dr. Singh, of course, a man of few words. I think he said, we can't go back on this now. This is part of the promises we have made to our international lenders. And this is absolutely necessary if we want to move on the path of reform. Reform cannot start and end with devaluation. I supported him fully and I said, listen, let's rework on it, but we can't go back to the age of licensing. We have to abolish licenses. PM, of course, was fully convinced. He said, all right, go back and do what you can. So we came back to my office in Udyog Bhavan. Montek was there, Mr. A.N. Verma was there. I think a couple of others were there. I think Jairam was also there for a while. I said, listen, the only way to save the policy is to show it is continuity with change. So let's go back to the father of India's industrialization, Jawaharlal Nehru, and come down the line and try to show continuity. So there was a scramble. We went back to look at speeches, earlier industrial policy resolution. So we found a passage from Nehru, then found a few things which Indira Gandhi had did, a few things which Rajiv Gandhi had said. So those paragraphs were drafted, the preamble became much longer than we wanted it to be. But the substance of the industrial policy resolution was exactly the same. The industrial policy, abolition of licenses, freeing industry, was all the same. We just added several paragraphs. If you go back and read the one that was approved finally, you'll have a paragraph where Jawaharlal Nehru is recalled, another paragraph where Indira Gandhi is recalled, and another paragraph where Rajiv Gandhi is recalled. We took it back to the cabinet. This time it just passed like knife through butter. Once we packaged it, presented it properly, I think people understood that things can't be the same. It cannot be business as usual. I think devaluation, trade policy changes, abolition of industrial licensing, and then the 2 or 3 step movement toward a market exchange rate. August 13, we announced EXIM scripts, dual exchange rate. The premium went to the exporter rather than the middleman. And then, sooner than we had expected, we moved to the single exchange rate. These were seminal changes, major changes that happened in the first 30 days. After that, I think, came the hard legislative work. And as you know, during that period, major legislative changes were made.